evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of council. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof this evening? I see none, so then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, approval of the council minutes. Looking for a mover and seconder to receive and approve the council minutes held April 10th. Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Hammond. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. And looking for a mover and seconder again for the special closed meeting minutes held April the 10th. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Dunn. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? And carried. Is there any business arising out of those minutes? I see none. So before we proceed with the rest of the agenda, our CEO, Mr. Neufeld, has an introduction to make to council and the public of Leamington this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening I am pleased to introduce to council and to our residents our interim fire chief, Tim Berthium. Tim has decades, 3 decades of experience with the City of Windsor, the last 7 as the Deputy Fire Chief, and most recently 5 years of experience as a Deputy Fire Chief in Calgary. He is also recently unretired as of today for a short duration while the municipality goes through the recruitment process for our fire chief. On that, Tim has also expressed an interest in helping us in that selection process. So we are very pleased to have this kind of experience at the helm of our fire department in the short term and to assist us in finding the fire chief for the long term. So I'm introducing Tim Berthium. Welcome, Tim. Thank you very much, Tim.
Moving on to, there's no court of revision this evening, but we do have public meetings. First public meeting is in regard to a drainage issue, and I believe, Alan, you're taking us through that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps council could refer to the drawing on page 23 of the agenda, the figure that shows the farm we're talking about. So administration received a request from the owner of a property at the corner of Highway 77 and County Road 14 to install 2 new access culverts for their proposed greenhouse development. The property currently has 1 entrance that's too small and in the wrong location for the layout of their future greenhouse development. Earlier, council appointed Baird AE as the engineer for the project. So the appointed engineer has now designed 2 new culverts and the removal of the existing culvert. Engineers determined that the existing access is not in need of repair or replacement, so the cost and to remove and relocate the culvert will be assessed entirely to the owner of the project. The owners also agreed, this is for council's information, the owners also agreed to pay for all future maintenance costs for these culverts. And the second entrance again will be assessed entirely to the property owner. In an effort to encourage development and work with this property owner, we've already given them permission to install 1 culvert, or culvert number 2, that was described in the engineer's report. So that's already in place. And on the financial end of things, the applicant and the property owner have already given us a deposit of $8,000 for the purpose of preparing the engineer's report. So we'll now have to tender for the second culvert number 1 and for the removal of the existing culvert. So once that's tendered, then we'll ask for another security deposit from the property owner, and we'll collect that before any construction continues. This project was included in the 2017 budget, and all costs will be assessed to the landowners. And in the staff report, you'll see that we have a number of recommendations. I just wanted to highlight the top 3 there. We recommend that the report provided by Baird AE for 2 new access culverts over the Reed Drain concession west branch pursuant to provisions of Section 78 of the Drainage Act be adopted. and the council authorize the project to be tendered, and should the said tenders be within the engineer's construction estimate, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to award the tender, and that bylaw 2317 authorizing the clerk be presented to council for first and second reading, and that the clerk send by mail a copy of the bylaw and notice of the quarter revision to each of the affected parties.
Any questions from council? Councillor Jacobs moving the recommendation, support by Councillor Wilkinson. Discussion on that motion? Oh, I'm sorry, and I should have gone to the public on this because it is a public, so we'll just belay that motion on the table for the time being and go to the public. Is there anyone here to address council in regard to this matter? I see no one. So then I'll come back to the mover and seconder to bring that back on the table for me. And further discussion from council. All in favor of that motion? And carried. Next item on the agenda is a public meeting regarding a planning issue. And it's in regard to the Project X Christian Community. And who is, Heather is taking us through this to start us off. Yes or no? Or do you want the presentation to be done? Okay, so then we'll have presentation done by George Bergen, the applicant for the building bridges. And if you two could identify yourselves, name and address.
Hi, I'm George Bergen, president of Project X Christian Community, or Building Bridges as I'll be referring to it tonight.
Okay.
Before we start with the presentation, I would like to just show a short video that the young adults or students of the high school put together that will introduce the theme for tonight's presentation.
If you knew my struggle, I live here, now I'm not sure. Conflicts arose at home, I couldn't stay, now I roam. If you knew my situation, looking for a couch to surf, soon enough I need to leave, back out past the gate, not having stability is what I hate. If you knew my sorrow, I didn't choose this. I don't like to argue. I wanted to be you, to make you proud, but I got lost somehow. If you knew me, would you really know there is so much more than what I show? A place to go, a place to escape. Just give me a place that feels safe. Place to place, sometimes nowhere to go. Why don't more people help? Do they not know? I finally found the bridge. This place might make the difference. Can I open the door? I want to see what is in store.
If you knew me. If you knew me.
Si tu me connaissais.
If you knew me.
If you knew me.
So unfortunately, the volume wasn't very high, but the theme of the video is If You Knew Me. I believe in Leamington there is a hidden population, and in that population is a lot to do with the young adults that we're going to call youth between the ages of 16 and 24. And including myself, when we got involved in 2015 to start looking in our community, this is a population we just didn't see. We don't see them out on the streets as you do in other cities. So going back from the beginning in 2015, when Meadowbrook Church decided to get involved more in our community to find an activity or a cause that we could get behind, we started by meeting with Rick Nichols, the local MPP, and he already brought an attention to us at that point that there's a lot of youth seeking funding in this community, but they don't have the counseling or guidance to find a way through the community. It was one of the items we heard, but we also looked into migrant workers, poverty, youth, other agencies, spiritual needs in our community. And one of the things that kept happening is doors kept opening towards youth. We were invited to a local meeting at the high school where there's some community leaders meeting with the principal, Kyle Berard. And they were talking about different needs that they had found through the school students, but also had started meeting. And one of the areas that was very encouraging is they had met with a hospital, and they had created this hotline for typically when there was mental illness coming in with these students and they couldn't figure it out what to do with them. It would take anywhere from 1 week to 3 weeks. And with the partnership with the hospital, they were able to create a line right now where they could call on them after they had done their internal assessments and get them in the hospital most of the time the same day, or worst case the following day, which was very encouraging for us to hear. Then we heard a concern that there was a lot of students coming to school without any nutrition. And so as they identified the nutrition program, they partnered with Deer Run Church, and they supplied the funds, and the hospitality team started cooking a breakfast for them, and they seen substantial increase in the students who are now utilizing that meal plan. Their grades were increasing dramatically. So we wanted to partner with them as well, and they found out that a lot of these students, that was the only meal they were getting throughout the week. They had nothing at home. So one of the challenges was there a group in our community that could come up with some food for these students on the weekends? And we were roughly about the same time of the year, they were starting to introduce the idea of that school would be out, and now these kids, the one meal they were getting weren't even going to be possible. So Meadowbrook was able to partner with Access in the community, and we started a nutrition program there where the young adults could come and get a bag of groceries once a week with screening either by the school or by Access themselves. To our surprise, we found out that less than 20% actually came from Leamington High. They were coming from all over our community, from other high schools. A lot of them didn't identify from anything. And we soon found out it was a lot bigger than what we thought it was. As we continued to meet, we also found out that there was another need that we didn't feel we could meet either, but the need that kept coming in there was the fact that there's no place for a lot of these kids to stay. They needed a place to go for a single night or even longer. We did not know how to attack that, but we said it is definitely a concern. Let's start with the nutrition program, but we'll keep talking and see what we could do. One of the concerns that we had is so many of these students or young adults were coming to school, whether it was an individual teacher or guidance counselor or principal, and they tried to help, but they had no resources. They maybe knew of one place to send them, but not necessarily meet all the needs. We were finding a lot of these youth were going to the pastors or leaders in churches, and same thing, they didn't know where to send them all. We're hearing it from the medical fields, whether it's a nurse, doctor, or just professionals in the hospitals or family health team. Again, they can help them with the immediate need, but they didn't know where to send them afterwards, especially if homelessness was there. Access is already one agency that starts addressing it, but they are limited in where they can stay, how many homes or rooms that they can put them in. And so what we found out, no matter what resource they were going to, there were too many silos, individual pockets in our community, and the youth were not figuring out how to navigate through the system. And it is sad to say that after all the stuff that they do, is no matter how hard they try, after less than a week of possibly staying in a motel or something, Leamington has nothing for these youth. That we would send them up to Windsor, to the city, to the Salvation Army homeless shelter. That's about all we could do for them. If they didn't want to choose that direction, they could try to go back on couch surfing and go on to different areas, but usually that would only last so long. And the stories that we were hearing, a lot of these youth then were being welcomed by a population in our community that is not where we would want them to go. A lot of the youth were indicating the only place they could go were those who wanted them to either use or move drugs, or worst case, even sell their bodies so they could have enough money to do the drugs and get into these pockets of homes that was just a downward spiral. Whether they went to Windsor or they chose this other option, they were definitely dropping out of school, dropping out of work if they had that, or they were just creating more problems because there was no one that could help them. Now, being a diverse community like we are, that comes with a lot of advantages, but I think that also stops some of the kids understanding what resources are all available, because whether you're a migrant, an immigrant coming from Mexico, or you're coming from across the seas, we all come with different challenges. We will only go back to our church or whatever our group of people that we can get help with, not understanding the full system that we have. And so we feel that there's a need that something needs to change so that we have a better communication system in our community. Before we wanted to go further, we decided to look what other communities were doing as well. So we went up to Toronto and visited with 360 Kids, Covenant House, went over to St. Catharines and met with Southridge Shelter, moved down to Welland and to see what they were doing with Rose City Kids, went down to Waterton and worked with a group called Youth for Christ or Youth Unlimited, met with a lot of the leaders in London regarding Teen Challenge. Then we made a trip locally to the Inn of Windsor in Windsor, the Windsor Youth Center, Downtown Missions. All amazing services, all meeting certain needs in their community, but not what Leamington needs. So one of the things that we also found very rewarding by visiting them, that they were very intrigued by what we were trying to do, how we were trying to set it up here in Leamington, but more so they're willing to share all their research and policies and procedures that match the legal regulations and just allow us to change them so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel to do everything. They've also all asked if they could come down to our community if and when this center is set up, because they were having a difficult time finding the partnerships that we have been able to start with already. So as we continue to look at the need that is here, the hidden population that the video referred to earlier, Meadowbrook soon found out this was a much bigger deal than one church or one agency should try to take on by itself. It was then that we decided to start working under a nonprofit organization called Project X Christian Community, which is under the renaming process right now to be called Building Bridges. It is our goal that we want as Building Bridges is to have a board of directors put together that we will be looking at these needs. Here is the current board. I reside as a president. We have a vice president, Krista Conrad, who is in the social work already. Our secretary, Stephanie Mercer, involved in the real estate. Our treasurer is Abe Clausen, a CEO of MC3. Anita Froese, who's involved in citizen and immigration in our community. And John Ferguson, a retired RBC employee. It is our mission as the Building Bridges directors to bridge the gap between the needs in our community and the resources by building strong relationships within our community and beyond. So what have we done so far? Number one, we have bought the formerly St. Joseph Church on 310 or 302 Shirk Street, in which we will be renaming very shortly to The Bridge, the Leamington Youth Resource Center. We also feel that we're going to be a benefactor of the many years of all the prayers that have been lifted up, many answered and many unanswered prayers that are going to come that will benefit us in this area. And some of the reasons we chose that location is also it will be very close to both the new high school as well as Cardinal Carter High School. It is also close enough that you could walk over to the hospital if you have any needs that you need to go over there for. It also has access to a lot of the local amenities, parks, as well as transportation. And so what have we done as far as communicating? So we've had a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors right around the church property. We had a meeting with them. We've also had a few meetings with other neighbors that were not able to attend. We've also put an announcement out on AM 800. We had a short interview on Cftv. We have created a website as well as the video that you've seen, and there's other videos on there we'd encourage you to visit. It has a lot of additional information that would support what we're doing. We had that public meeting at Leamington District High School just last week where there was over 150 people showing up. And obviously we're meeting here tonight, as well as we've hired someone right now called Maria Peters who will continue that process of communicating and building relationships. We've also been in the process of developing a site plan and the center, hiring a full-time director of operations, as well as the fundraising has begun. With the fundraising, our goal is to approach the private sector of our community. We strongly believe that there is enough support, we'll get it, but we also know that there is some public funding available, including the 2017 rental housing component, which was funded under the 2016 Social Infrastructure Fund. This is one of very few funds that will actually go towards the capital. John will be speaking to some other funds that we have been awarded and others that we'll be applying for that will help us provide the services inside of there. The reason we are asking for this now is we also feel not only would that funding go quickly to help us build that thing, but every week, every month that we wait, there's a lot of youth out there that just don't have any resources to find a help at this time. So within the bridge, our mission is that we want to help transitioning youth with needs to a brighter future by providing resources and a safe place to experience love and hope. The vision, we won't be satisfied till every youth in the area will have a place to go where they can access resources and experience success. And so to make that happen, we have created a steering committee. Currently, I will chair the committee. John Sutton beside me will be the vice chair. Deba Weigel is in real estate, but also a community/parent rep who is secretary. And the team members, we have Kyle Berard from Leamington District Secondary School, Bill Baker from the Leamington Hospital, as well as Leamington Area Family Health Team. Another team member is Pastor Ike, who will be representing not only Deer Run Church, but also the faith community. And members that we're currently looking to do is we would love to have one of the neighborhood members join our team, as well as 2 youth, one that will be coming just from the high school, one that has used the services. And when we hire a director of operations, they'll be joining this team, as well as any other agencies that will be joining us to make this a better place. We've also approached and had several amazing ad hoc members join. So from the municipality, we've been communicating a lot with Janine Lassaline Bergelin. From the OPP, we have Stuart Bertram. Our planning consultant is Jackie Lassaline. We've created a PR team, which consists of Jordan Clausen, Jay Menz, Megan Whittle, and Will Froze. For bookkeeping, we have an amazing lady, Joan Glass, who's helping us with it. For accounting, Ryan Sanger. Legal, we've David Hallowell and Matthew Caron. And our contractor for both the renovations and eventually the Phase 2 would be Baronetti Construction. So we feel that the bridge will need to be a safe place, a place where they can be welcomed and loved, a clean place, a resource where they can actually get some of their needs met. But more than anything, I believe we need to have food there, and the food will be probably the number one thing that will attract these kids to make it even an option for them. Not only do we want this to be a safe place for all our guests, we are definitely concerned and will make sure that this will be a safe place not only for our neighbors, but the residents of Leamington as well. So with Phase 1, which is currently the building that we have purchased, not only do we want to recruit a full-time director of operations, also get a volunteer base together. We want to continue to develop the partnerships in our community. We know there's a lot more agencies than what we have already on our team that will be huge contributors to this operation going forward. We'll be determining the hours referral system, developing the site plan, which will go down a little bit later. But one of the most important things is the current partners that we have, we feel that already gives us a solid foundation, and that is Access, who has a lot of resources, and again, John will share what they are. Having the ability to be able to use the hospital for all the mental illness, but also the physical resources that we have that volunteers typically don't have, and being connected with the education system. Kyle from the high school has been a huge resource of information and feedback from all the students. We've had tremendous support from the local churches and their willingness to have volunteers come out. OPP, SECC, Children's Aid is another big group that has approached us. As you know, it used to be 16, currently it's going up to 18, but when there are families in foster homes and they reach that age, they have no place for these young adults or young kids to go. And so they're very excited that they'll be able to keep these families together in a community instead of sending that person to Windsor or out on their own when they're not ready to go as well. And I know there's many other activities or agencies that will be joining us to make this happen as well. Within Phase 1, we will also be starting like community garden and have other stuff on the outside as well. Here's, again, a quick view of what the inside of our facility will look like. Some of the key items I just want to highlight, we found it is, like again I said earlier, the food is one of the things that will bring them. So not only do we want to have a kitchen so we can prepare the food for the guest, but we also want to be doing cooking classes, teaching these young adults how to cook within a budget, and just learning how to cook in general. We also will have a homework area for any of the students. A lot of the students aren't going to come here just for the housing. They'll be coming there just for tutoring or just socializing. There'll be a rec area in there as well. We will also have a chapel or media room, depending what the needs of the kids will be, and as well as showers and laundry. It again broke our heart when we met with so many of these students who are students or just young adults, they're trying to find a way through the system, and it's heartbreaking that there isn't a place where they can go take a shower in our community. You just can't go in somewhere and say, can I take a shower? You can't go do laundry unless you have money, which both of these are two elements that we take for granted that most of these kids do not have. As well as you see that we'll have a lot of office space for our partners, our staff, and volunteers, so that, again, we will have on-site help for these students. So Phase 2 is why we're here tonight. Obviously, we're going to need a zoning bylaw change for the residential component. We could probably go to the second slide already. Here's a kind of a view of what we're going to have is we want to have 11 dorm-style rooms, which will be that emergency to the transitional housing, anywhere from one night stay all the way to less than a year. We have experienced that a lot of these youth only need a few days, a few weeks, sometimes even a month, just to get their things figured out and so they can get back in their home or their current living styles. But again, currently we have nothing for them to do that. There will also be 13 single bedrooms where we want them to transition into when they have some means of income. So we will be approaching Ontario Works, or if they have jobs, then they would be paying at obviously affordable rates, not regular rates. Within Phase 2, we will also be monitoring 24/7. We will have surveillance cameras, but also volunteer/staff there to, to guarantee that there will not be overnight guests or parties or a accumulation, which we hear is happening in a lot of the places today where there's low and affordable housing, is when some of the young adults are losing their home, they will migrate to the one place they still can. We want to make sure that will not happen at this facility as well. We will be doing assessments for each guest and to keep everyone safe. And within that, that will also determine how many will be going to the hospital or, where they need to go for recovery, whether that will be up in Windsor or other areas. We will not be that rehabilitation center. We're going to be a resource center that will offer some of the overnight stay. We will have agreements that they will be asked to sign so that they need to follow and make sure that they're meeting those needs to keep it a safe place. If not, they will be asked to go somewhere else, again, seeking the long-term help that other facilities offer. And again, while they're in our care, they will be working with the necessary professionals or volunteers to better themselves until they're ready to move into our community. And as I mentioned earlier, we call it youth, but these ages 16 to 24 is what all other agencies and other communities are just identifying as youth, and so that's what we have just called it youth, understanding that some of them are definitely young adults. Within the same setup here, we have left the basement open. We know there's a lot of requests for different things, but we don't want to make a decision until we have some of the guests stay with us. But some of the ideas that have been thrown out is having a recording studio, or even just something as simple as floor hockey or social activities that the guests could do during the winter when it's too cold outside, or art studio as well. So as far as the proposed site plan, again, we can go to the second page if we want. Having both the center and housing component together, we believe is very vital. Having them on site with us so that we don't have to travel around the community. Currently, we're already experiencing that in Leamington, where there are different homes around our community, and Access and other agencies are trying to work with them, but a lot of them get lost. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of migration of extra students coming in there and turning it into a bad place to live. So we believe it's very important that they will be on the same site where we can control what's going on. It will also, they'll have access to our community garden, our meditation garden. There will be a lot of recreational opportunities for them, as well as just outdoor space where they can go and just think and process things, as well as we are thinking of fencing in the whole area, not only to keep the community safe, but also it gives them that safe place of where they are to stay inside as well. So we embrace the neighborhood and the community's input to help us become a better neighbor and bring the resources that our youth need. So some of the things that we have gotten from the feedback that as we've been listening and hearing from our neighborhood and the community is the idea of putting a neighborhood member on our team that fence around the whole yard, again, we believe is also just to help address some of the concerns the neighbors around the area will have. And what we've done is also hired Maria, even though she's not going to be in a full-time role. She is currently a student at St. Clair College. We're going to hire her for the summer, and then she's going to do her internship with us in the fall, just so that we can address some of the immediate needs of continued communication, building partnerships, and getting all the procedures and process in place. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Sutton, who is the Executive Director of Access.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's certainly a pleasure and an honor to be before you tonight to talk about Access Canada Community Support Services and our role in the proposed Youth Engagement Centre. George spoke a little bit about the need, but first let me tell you what Access currently does. Currently, we provide a number of programs throughout the Essex County area, primarily in the South Shore region. We have after-school programs for both elementary school and high school students in both Harrow and Leamington. We have a great community nutrition program that operates sites and community gardens across the city and county, and a number of partners with our local elementary schools as well. We offer cooking classes, food service programs. We work a lot with community living as partners, both in terms of employing some of their clients and providing food to their organizations as well. We have a youth and transition worker who currently works with young people who are transitioning out of care with Children's Aid Society into regular society. And we have our obviously our housing programs as well that deal with people from all walks and backgrounds that obviously are experiencing chronic homelessness or are at risk for homelessness. At Access, I work with a committed team of individuals who all believe in one simple proposal, and that's that residents of the county should be able to receive social support services in the communities in which they live so that they can maintain that connection to their community and realize, their potential within those confines as well. So when we looked at the need, and George already talked about this, we see over 100 kids annually who are currently homeless or at risk for homelessness. Now, the first thing we should say is that looks a little bit different than our stereotypical views of adult homelessness. I know when I think of that, I think of, the people on the streets of Toronto or downtown Windsor with their worldly possessions and, a few grocery bags or a grocery cart. The kids don't look like that. They're couch surfing from house to house, from friend's place to friend's place, while they're trying to work out either problems at home or issues that have been dealt to them. A lot of times we have the preconceived notion that it must have been something they did, but when in actuality, national statistics will show that well over 50% have been physically abused, another 17% have been sexually abused, and many emotionally abused as well. So the main reasons for the process behind youth homelessness have nothing to do with the choices that they've made, but rather life circumstances that have been thrust upon them. And as we've talked about briefly, youth have no idea how to access that social service network. They don't know where to turn. They're unsure how to navigate that system. They're unsure where to go for help. Hence, they end up bouncing from couch to couch looking for that solution. They don't want to go to Windsor. They don't want to be housed in any kind of shelters there because they don't want to leave their friends and their social support network. And I'm sure we can all realize how important that is. I know as a teenager, like my own kids, I always didn't tell mom and dad everything. It was my friends and classmates and support system that I turned to more often than not. So we want to maintain that connection to the community as well. So what should we do? Well, as we talked about, we want to build a collaborative network. We want to provide leadership. We want to maintain that connection to their community. We want to create that one-stop, no wrong door approach where a kid can turn for help. And I should also point out that we don't want the Youth Engagement Center to be solely about youth homelessness. We want it to be for that kid who maybe there's conflict at home, maybe it's a very loud environment some nights, who needs that quiet place to get away and get his or her homework done. We want it to be for that kid who maybe, has difficulty making friends and needs that social support that we can provide in that network of individuals that he or she can interact with. And we want it to be for that high achiever as well. He or she that, excels in school, excels in social life, and is just looking for a way to give back to the community and develop their own leadership skills. So there'll be a place for all those kids at our center. And we want to provide those necessary social supports that re-engage them with family, re-engage them with the workforce, and re-engage them with school, depending upon that nature. So we want to provide that safe and secure facility, as George talked about, and each young person who walks in the door will receive their individual assessment by trained individuals so that we can develop a unique plan for them that will reconnect them in the areas that they need it the most. Our job will be to build upon our social support network and to bring in community partners like the Sexual Assault Crisis Center, South Essex Community Center, who offers some great employment programs, CMHA, Family Service Windsor Essex, Housing Information Services, just to name a few. The bottom line is whatever service that young person needs, we want to be able to bring it to the Youth Engagement Center or refer them and provide transportation to that location where they can benefit from that as well. So I'm proud to announce that on behalf of the Building Bridges team, Access County put together a proposal to the Ontario Trillium Foundation Youth Opportunities Fund. And we've been awarded a $525,200 grant over 3 years solely for the purpose of engaging youth in the center. So that's really going to help us operationally for the first 3 years. And as George talked about, we're going to run a separate capital campaign and work on, the ongoing operational support as well. so that you can rest assured this isn't a fly-by-night operation, but we are deeply committed, and Access will house many of its operations in the Youth Engagement Center because we believe in this community, we believe in its young people, and we believe with your leadership we can make a positive difference in their lives and get them back on track. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and for your consideration of our proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll ask you gentlemen to stay seated there if you don't mind. Heather, do you want to proceed or yes? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think now would be a good time for me to go through the planning part of this application. The purpose of the meeting this evening, this is the statutory public meeting that's required for a rezoning application that has been submitted by the applicants who are also here this evening. We're calling this file ZBA number 146, and it's for the property at 302 Shirk Street in Leamington. At present, the property is zoned institutional-8, which is a site-specific zoning category that permits a range of institutional uses, but it also permits a temporary office trailer, which was on the property for about a year and a half or so at the time St. Michael's Church was being constructed. So they had a need for additional office space and meeting room space. So this temporary office trailer was located at this particular location, and we had to do a rezoning at that time to allow it to exist. That use and the rezoning that permitted it expired in February of last year. But the uses that are permitted are still the institutional uses. The applicants are here tonight because they need a rezoning application in order to permit residential accommodations in addition to a community center use. I'll get into that in a little more detail in a minute. The property, as I said, is located at 302 Shirk Street. It comprises a property of an area of about 2.35 acres in size. As I indicated, it's previously occupied by the St. Joseph's Church. I believe it's been vacant for about 2 or so years now, and since that time, the applicants have purchased the building and are now in the process of readapting and reusing the existing building for purposes of a youth engagement center. The services, as they've indicated, include counseling, education, and hopefully accommodations, residential accommodations, to help youth in our community who don't have a safe place to call home. At the present time, to the north of the property are several apartment buildings, higher density multiple residential. To the south and west are single detached residential areas that would include Audrey, Clare, and Jane Streets, as well as Coronation Avenue. To the east is the Bank of Montreal and a number of other commercial businesses that are within walking distance of the site. This area is serviced with municipal water, sanitary, and storm services. As well, Shirk Street isn't considered an arterial road. At present, the site is designated residential in the town's official plan, and as I indicated earlier, it's zoned institutional-8, so I-8. The residential designation permits a wide range of residential uses, all types of residential uses, as a matter of fact, as well as ancillary uses that would be there to serve the surrounding residential area. The former church was permitted on this site because it served the surrounding local community. Other types of uses that are permitted in residential designations include institutional and public open space type uses such as schools, parks, daycare centers, etc. The Youth Engagement Center that's proposed by the applicant is to be comprised of both the institutional and residential components. As indicated previously, the I-8 zoning permits a wide range of institutional uses, everything from churches, daycare, museums, hospitals, clinics, cultural institutions, schools, community centers, assembly halls, as well as uses that are accessory to those uses. The Youth Engagement Center, without the residential component, is considered a community center, thus is a permitted use under the current I-8 zoning. It's for the residential component of the use that we are here tonight. The applicants are proposing a one-stop facility with a place for, as they've indicated already, a place for the youth to come to get the necessary help they need, as well as hopefully a place for them to stay overnight for either short-term or maybe even longer term. The preliminary site plan that we were able to take a look at has showing about 13 bachelor and one-bedroom units, along with 11 rooms for short-term accommodations in the residential component. And as I said earlier, it's the residential component that is not permitted by the current institutional zoning, and that's why we're here tonight. So in specific, the applicants are proposing to add the Youth Engagement Center with the accessory residential use as the additional permitted use for the property within the current zoning category. This is being proposed, the residential component would be proposed to be part of, it has to be located on the subject lands, and it would also have to be part of a youth engagement center. The definition that we've come up with for a youth engagement center shall mean an institutional facility funded in whole or in part under an act of the Parliament of Canada or the Province of Ontario, or by a not-for-profit organization with a focus on the provision of various social services to youth. It is a multi-service and multi-agency hub providing a wide range of services for youth in a single location and may include accessory dwellings, excuse me, specifically for the housing of youth, participating in the social services provided by the Youth Engagement Center. Other accessory uses may include services that exclusively support and/or complement the Youth Engagement Center by providing opportunities for the practicing of life skills. When we review an application for rezoning, as a planner, I take a look at the provincial policy statement as well as other policy documents. In this particular situation, we've taken a look at the provincial policy statement and how it relates to what is being proposed by the applicants. In specific, one of the things that's required under the provincial policy statement, also known as the PPS, there shall be a provision for an appropriate range and mix of housing types and densities that are to meet the social, health, and well-being requirements of current and future residents, including those with special needs and those who are vulnerable. The youth in Leamington who are homeless would fall into this category as they have special needs and they are also vulnerable. Secondly, the provincial policy statement encourages residential intensification, as well as the adaptive reuse of existing buildings. This is an increase in intensification over what is there now. In addition, this is an adaptive reuse of the existing building. And then lastly, under the provincial policy statement, healthy, livable communities are to be provided. And that is usually done through the efficient use of land that provides for a mix of residential, employment, recreational, parks and open space, and institutional uses. The plan is always to meet the long-term needs of community residents. The proposed Youth Engagement Center is located in a central location. It provides for a walkable, healthy community for those using the facility. Both of our high schools would be within walking distance. That would encourage the youth to stay enrolled in school. There are also parks and shopping facilities that are within walking distance of the site. Accordingly, I'm of the opinion that this proposal is consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement. In terms of the county official plan and the municipality's official plan, the county OP encourages development within the primary settlement area. For Leamington, that would be the former municipality, the former town of Leamington, in areas that are serviced, and this is one of those areas. The municipal official plan, again, as it designates the property residential, it permits all types of residential uses. So the residential component, the dwelling that's being proposed by the applicants through this rezoning application, is a permitted use in that designation. Accordingly, I'm of the opinion that this application conforms to Leamington's official plan. Lastly, I wanted to indicate that a building permit has already been issued and the applicants are in the process of changing over the existing building to a community center. My understanding is work is hopefully going to be complete by early fall. Should they be successful in their rezoning application to get the residential component, they would need to apply for another building permit. They would also have to go through the site plan approval process for that new dwelling. At that time, we would consider things like on-site parking, access to the site, landscaped open space, buffers from surrounding uses, proper servicing, such as stormwater management. The building would have to be designed to comply with the zoning bylaw as well. There is on-site parking on the property at present, part of which is paved, part of which is gravel. The applicants have provided a site plan, which is included in the report, that shows the use of that part of that parking area. Again, site plan control will deal with the exact location of the parking lot should this building be permitted, and it would be advisable to have all the parking spaces paved. And without relief from the paving requirement, that would be a requirement, a standard requirement. The applicants have applied for, or are planning to apply for, another type of funding. I wanted to mention this because the municipality has some involvement in this. It's the Social Infrastructure Fund Rental Housing Capital Component of the Investment in Affordable Housing Program. And in July of 2016, Council agreed to participate in this program, not necessarily for this particular site, though. And the program provides a reduction in property taxes for the approved projects under this category. And in this case, if the applicants are successful, another report will be prepared to go to council, as well as a bylaw would be necessary in order to enact the request to have a reduction in the property taxes. And the reduction would be to a rate equivalent to or lower than the single residential rate. As part of the rezoning process, we give public notice through by mail within a 400-foot radius of a subject property, and we also post the notice on the site as well as on the municipal website. As a result of that notice, we received several phone calls, and up until the time the report was prepared, I hadn't received any objections to this application. We did get 2 email letters in opposition on Friday and then again today, one on each day. I believe the one from Robert Tatimer has been circulated to council already. Would you like me to read that one too? Are we okay? I'll read you the other one though. It came late this afternoon. Sorry, it came this morning. This one is from Bill Chaplin. Were you circulated with that one as well? Oh, okay, then I won't go through that either. So they do have concerns that one is about the supervision and how the business, the program is going to operate, and the other one is more to do with whether the use should be permitted in the municipality, not just the overnight. It sounds like the entire use. make sure I've covered everything. I guess the last thing is that based on all the information that I was able to review and research as part of this application, I find that this application conforms to the official plan for the municipality, the county official plan, and it's consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement. There may be information that's presented this evening that I'm not aware of, but based on what I was able to gather ahead of time, I am of the opinion that this is a good use for the site. It's a good reuse of the site, and that it is a good use for that building. And it conforms to all the policies that we have in place.
Thank you very much. We also have a presentation by the planning consultant, Jackie Laslin. And yes, council, we will be going back for questions before we pull the public forward, I think.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I would like to start off by thanking Heather for a very extensive review, and I absolutely concur with everything that she has said this evening. I'm not going to go into detail in my presentation. Heather's covered it off. Basically, I'm going to give you my professional opinion. We have a situation where the property is designated residential. It allows for the requested zoning bylaw amendment of residential to allow for a residential accommodation is an accessory use to the youth resource center that's being proposed on site. It's considered accessory, and this is why we've come up with a definition of what a youth resource center is, so that there's clarity and no ambiguity in the future as to exactly what it is, and that the residential use is accessory to it. So, in my professional opinion, does the application for zoning bylaw amendment to allow for the residential as an accessory to the principal use of a resource center make sound planning? Yes. It will support the healthy community policy of both the provincial policy and as well your municipal policies. It is providing affordable housing and supporting a vulnerable group in the municipality. It's taking a building that for all intents and purposes has been sitting vacant and will allow for an adaptive reuse of that building. It will provide an excellent location for the social service that's going to be provided. As Heather indicated, you have a high school that's within minutes walking distance for the youth that are going to be attending here to be able to stay in school. It supports that initiative. Recreation facilities are close, etc. Heather went into detail. I shall not continue. The fourth point, it's an appropriate infilling building within the neighborhood. You have a circumstance where it's residential. The residential building is appropriate. And it is a mass and a height and a density that supports the neighborhood. It's 2 stories. There's very comparable buildings within the very immediate neighborhood, and is not going to be a 12-story building that will overshadow the existing residences. So in my professional planning opinion, the requested zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statements, conforms with your official plan that designates it residential, complies with the intent of your comprehensive zoning bylaw to regulate it for an institutional use, and makes sound planning. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much. Yes, before we start pulling members of the public up to talk to council, I think it would be good if council members had questions they wanted to direct to either our planner, the proponent's planner, or the proponents themselves. So, Councillor Jacobs, I know you had a question.
Thank you, Worship. My question I'd like to address to Heather. Heather, with the presentation that you just gave us, your opinion is based on sound planning, I presume, of the municipality and the PPS, correct?
To your worship, yes, that is true. Yes.
So based on what you've told us this evening, irregardless of what decision is made here by council, as far as the designation of the property and the way you outlaid it to us, if we even turned it down tonight, they could go to OMB and it would almost be a rubber stamp from OMB, would it not?
Do you, your worship, I don't like to use the term rubber stamp because it really never is a rubber stamp. But the things that the Ontario Municipal Board looks at the time of a hearing on a rezoning application would be consistency with the provincial policy statement, the policies, as well as an application that's in keeping with the intent of an official plan and conforming to the official plan. And it's my opinion that this application does all of that.
Okay, I'll hold up with the rest of the questions. I'm sure council has some more. I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Heather, to you, can you explain to us, I believe there is some confusion when you say that the lands are currently designated residential. However, the zoning is institutional. So I think there is some confusion there, because if that's the case, then why do you need to come to us to ask for the zoning to include the residential? Just fine-tune that for me if you don't mind. And then I have another question, if I may.
To you, your worship, official plan policies and, the property is designated residential in the official plan. They're like broader policies that apply to the entire municipality. So every property in a municipality has a designation that applies to it. The zoning bylaw then has a category or a zone that implements the official plan. So in a case like this, a use or the designation residential, there are a number of different types of uses that would be allowed in a residential designation. Not just residential uses, but also uses that serve the residential area. So uses that would normally be found like a park or a school, a church. All of those uses would be allowed in a residential designation, but they may not be permitted under the zoning bylaw. We usually zone for the types of uses that are on the site or planned for the site at any given time. In this case, the property had a church, which is an institutional use. So it had the institutional zoning, which was allowed in a residential designation. The residential use then that's being proposed by the applicant needs a residential zoning category with the regulations that would involve setbacks and such.
That's great. And further to that, if I may, planning usually asks if the application that's before us will impact the surrounding properties. And maybe, Jackie, that might be the question to you, because you've given us all the reasons why it conforms to the technical. So to me, having sat on Committee of Adjustment, this is a question that comes up, and very often we may agree with the technical, but then when you throw in this one, this becomes a bit of a social question. Answer that for me if you could, please.
Absolutely. Any application, whether it be Committee of Adjustment or a zoning bylaw or an official plan amendment, we always take a look at the neighborhood. And actually, I spoke to it earlier in my presentation. You have the circumstance where the neighborhood is residential. You've got a residential use. This use is existing institutional, which is going to continue, and we've asked to have the residential added as a permitted use. It fits within the neighborhood and will have no impact in that land use perspective. In addition, site plan control will be implemented, fences will be installed, trees will be put in, outside amenity space will include things like a yoga and a meditation. They're all things that are found in a residential neighborhood. It's going to fit in quite nicely to where it is. Now, it is designated residential, and if this use wasn't occurring here, you could see where a developer would look at that lovely large property and say, hey, you know, maybe a larger, more intense residential use would be appropriate. And yes, there could be argument for it. So what I'm saying is not only is this appropriate for the lot, but it's also a better alternative, if you want to say.
I guess I was hoping you'd answer the social aspect instead of the technical. To me, those are the technical things. Council looks at it as we're obviously going to have some residents that, well, we had two that wrote in and said they weren't in favor of it. Do you think this will negatively, maybe I should have phrased it that way, do you think this will negatively impact the neighborhood?
No. There will be no negative impacts on the neighborhood. The building height is consistent with what's there, so you're not going to have something that's going to be right immediately in somebody's backyard. We have a setback. So there's a separation from the existing use. You have also, from a technical perspective, you're going to have that buffer that's going to stop any noise from going over. You're also going to have a very quiet use that will be happening in the background. So the existing neighbors, at the open houses that we had, the two of them, we heard from a number of the neighbors that were in support because they're going, this is going to be wonderful. What about a quiet use? You couldn't ask for a quieter use because the kids predominantly are going to be inside the building. Growing a garden out in the back does not initiate noise. You know, having a yoga meditation garden does not initiate noise, but it does provide the kids that are there that aspect that they need of being outside in an amenity space. So yeah, I think there will be no negative impact from this whatsoever.
Councillor Dunn?
Through you, Your Worship. My question is for George and John regarding the screening. You were talking there'll be a screening process for the youth coming in and some sort of accountability for these youths that are keeping them on track and going to school. I understand from other sources that there are a lot of youth that go to the high school that are hungry. So I was curious of what your screening process is and keeping them in school.
Well, the screening process is designed to take a look at the individual needs of that particular person. So we'll run through a number of questions and background checks with them to determine what services they are in most need of, and then build an individual program for that individual. So it could be housing needs, it could be social supports, it could be contact with other social service providers. So the bottom line is what we want to do is while we maintain their connection to their social network and to the community at large, provide that wraparound support that gives them that hand up they need